Good day, future accountants. This is Group 3. We are tasked to report about the Philippine banking industry. We decided to divide the group into 3. Therefore, I and Formento and Harriet Christine Sala will discuss the nature of business. Ricardo Alico Jr. and Kathleen Bawi-in will discuss the regulatory bodies, and Menchie Obligado and Janegin Anduyan will share the issuances and audit considerations. So guys, here we go. Business banking is a company's financial dealings with an institution that provides business loans, credit savings account, and checking accounts, specifically designed for companies rather than for individuals. Business banking occurs when a bank or division of bank only deals with business. A bank that deals mainly with individuals is generally called retail bank, while bank that deals with capital market is known as investment bank. Hello guys, so let's start. Banking industry. Nature of the business. Banking is an industry that handles cash, credit, and other financial transactions. Banks provide a safe place to store extra cash and credit. They offer savings accounts, certificates of deposit, and checking accounts. We have also the revenue cycle. First, we have the accepting deposits. So bank source of funds are primarily deposits. People who put money into banks are called depositors. Banks encourage deposits by protecting the money and by paying the depositor interest. Next is the providing funds to borrowers. So using the accumulated funds of many depositors, the bank makes loans to customers it considers like to repay. When banks lend money, they put it to work. The money that people borrow goes to buy products or services, to manufacture goods, and to start businesses. So, in this way, the money that banks lend works to keep the economy going. So, next is the bank's income, the interest spread. To earn a profit, a bank needs to pay less for the funds it receives from depositors than it earns on the loans it makes. The difference between what a bank pays in the interest and what it receives in interest is the spread or net interest income. The spread is not pure profit. The spread is income or revenue, but the bank incurs a lot of other costs to get this income. So to arrive at the figure for profit, we need to deduct all such costs. So next is expenditure banks costs. Banks incur a large number of costs or expenditures to procure business, safeguard money, and keep its operation going. Some example of costs include maintaining the security of your money, personal expenses, building maintenance costs, and so forth. Profit or net income is what is left of revenue after costs are deducted. Next is other income. Banking today is not as simple as earning interest on the spread. Rapidly changing conditions, complex factors, a 24-hour-a-day global economy, and financial interdependency among nations set the banking climate. Some of the activities banks have adopted in response to competition from other financial firms. So banks have additional income sources. Next is COVID-19 perspective for the Philippine banking industry. So, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP issued the implementing rules and regulation for the Bayanihan Act RA number 11469. The law requires all lenders under BSP supervision to grant a 30-day grace period or extension for the payment of loans due within the enhanced community quarantine or ECQ period, without imposing additional interest, penalties, or charges on their borrowers. Further, the BSP also relaxed the Know Your Customer requirements for both over the counter and electronic or online transactions. This is to make sure that Filipinos continue to have access to basic government and financial services in the COVID-19 situation. Next is the banking sector developments. So, in this figure, Philippine banking system. So, the Philippine banking system sustained modest growth and amid COVID-19 pandemic. So, total asset of the Philippine banking system increased by 6.8% year on year, though at lower growth than the end December 2019 growth to 19 trillion as of the end November 2020. So, nakita siya sa kanang figure.
Hi guys, so for today I will be discussing to you the continuation of the nature of business in banking. So we have here sources of income. So how do banks make money? Diversified banks make money in a variety of different ways. However, at the core, banks are considered lenders. Banks generally make money by borrowing money from a depositor and compensating them with a certain interest rate. The banks will lend the money out to borrowers, charging the borrowers a higher interest rate and profiting off the interest rate spread. Additionally, banks usually diversify their business mixes and generate money through alternative financial services, including investment banking and wealth management. However, broadly speaking, the money generating business of banks can be broken down into the following. So first, we have interest income. Second is capital markets income and a fee-based income. So what is an interest income? An interest income is the primary way that most commercial banks make money. As mentioned earlier, it is completed by taking money from a depositor who do not need their money for now. And in return for depositing their money, depositors are compensated with a certain interest rate and security for their funds. And next is capital markets income. So, capital markets related income, muna siyang banks often provide market services for corporations and investors. The capital market are essentially a marketplace that matches business that need a capital to fund growth or projects with investors with the capital market and require a return on their capital. Banks facilitate capital markets activities with several services such as sales and trading services, underwriting services, and M&A advisory. So the last one is a fee-based income. Banks also charge non-interest fees for their services. For example, if a depositor opens a bank account, the bank may charge monthly account fees for keeping the account open. Bank also charge fees for various other services product that they provide. Some examples are credit card fees, checking accounts, saving accounts, mutual fund, revenue and investment management fees, and custodian fees. So we also have here an example of companies related to banking. We both have universal and commercial bank. So ang ako nang gikuha diri is those bank nga familiar sa atoa. So we have here BDO, China Bank, CIMB Bank Philippines, Citibank Philippines, Development Bank of the Philippines, East West Banking Corporation, Land Bank of the Philippines, and last is the Philippine National Bank. So that would be all.
So the next part is the regulatory bodies. There are several government regulatory bodies that have the power to establish additional reporting requirements. So these regulatory bodies are the Securities and Exchange Commission or SEC, the Insurance Commission, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the Professional Regulation Commission or PRC, and the Professional Regulatory Board of Accountancy or PRBOA. So these regulated entities such as public utilities, insurance companies, and banks or corporations are to submit their audited financial statements to their relevant government regulatory agency as well as filing to the SEC. So the SEC or the Securities and Exchange Commission acts independently of the U.S. government and was established by the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. One of the most comprehensive and powerful agencies, the SEC enforces the federal securities laws and regulates the majority of the securities industry. Its regulatory coverage includes the U.S. stock exchanges, options markets, and options exchanges, as well as all other electronic exchanges and other electronic securities markets. It also regulates investment advisors who are not covered by the state regulatory agencies. So the SEC consists of 6 divisions and 24 offices. So their goals are to interpret and take enforcement actions on securities laws, issue new rules, provide oversight of securities institutions, and coordinate regulation among different levels of government. So the 6 divisions and their respective roles are, so there are 6. So first is the Division of Corporate Finance. So it ensures investors are provided with material information, that is information relevant to a company's financial prospects or stock price, in order to make informed investment decisions. So the second is the Division of Enforcement. So in charge of enforcing SEC regulations by investigating cases and prosecuting civil status and administrative proceedings. So the third one is the Division of Investment Management. So it regulates investment companies, variable insurance products, and federally registered investment advisors. So the fourth one is the Division of Economic and Risk Analysis. So it integrates economics and data analytics into the core mission of the SEC. So the fifth one is the Division of Trading and Markets. So it establishes and maintains standards for fair, orderly, and efficient markets. So the last one is the Division of Examination. So it conducts the SEC's national exam program. So the SEC is allowed to bring only civil actions, either in federal court or before an administrative judge. So criminal cases fall under the jurisdiction of law enforcement agencies within the Department of Justice. However, the SEC often works closely with such agencies to provide evidence and assist with court proceedings. Commission. So in insurance, a certain percentage of premium produced that is retained as compensation by insurance agents and brokers, also known as acquisition cost. So in reinsurance, the primary insurance company usually pays the reinsurer its proportion of the gross premium it receives on a risk. So the purpose of insurance commissioners is to maintain fair pricing for insurance products, protecting the solvency of insurance companies, preventing unfair practices by insurance companies, and ensuring availability of insurance coverage. So the Professional Regulation Commission, so otherwise known as PRC, it is a 3-man commission attached to the Department of Labor and Employment. Its mandates is to regulate and supervise the practice of the professionals who constitute the highly skilled manpower of the country. Subject to the approval of the Professional Regulation Commission or the PRC, is the Board of Accountancy or the BOA shall promulgate rules and regulations and set professional standards for the practice of accountancy. So the state of boards of accountancy are created in statute to assist state government in the licensing and regulation of the public accounting profession. The professional licensing and regulation is a state-based regulatory system in the United States.
Issuance, from the root word issue, is the process of offering securities in order to raise funds from investors. Companies may issue bonds or stocks to investors as a method of financing the business. Issuance is the act of making something known or making something available. When a product is produced and released on the market, this is an example of issuances. So, example, let's assume that Brilliant Company issues 100,000 shares of common stock for $10 per share. The proceeds from the issuance of common stock are $100 million. In other words, in any scenario, the company will debit the cash accounts for $100 million. Let's talk about Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is the central bank of the Republic of the Philippines. It was established on July 3, 1993, pursuant to the provision of the 1987 Philippine Constitution and the new Central Bank Act of 1993. The BSP took over the Central Bank of the Philippines, which was established on January 3, 1994, as the country's central monetary authority. The BSP enjoys fiscal and administrative autonomy from national government in the pursuant of its mandated responsibilities. Now here are some of the BSP circulars of the year 2020. We have here number 1074, number 1075, number 1081, number 1082, number 1091, number 1092, number 1095, and 1099. Issuance number 1074 talks about the amendments to regulations on financial audit of banks. For audited financial statements, the regulation on financial audit aimed to enhance the quality of information channeled to the supervisory process and ultimately promote fairness, transparency, and accuracy in financial reporting. For financial audit, banks shall cause an annual financial audit by an external auditor in the list of selected external auditors for BSF is not later than 30 calendar days after the close of the calendar year or fiscal year adopted by the banks. Section 84 of Accounting states about the foreign currency deposits and corresponding cover. The Monetary Board, in its resolution number 48, dated January 8, 2020, approved the amendments to the relevant provision of the Manual of Regulations for Banks and Manual of Regulations for Foreign Exchange Transactions. Number 1075 talks about the amendments to regulations on financial audit of non-bank financial institutions. Now, for audited financial statements, in submission of AFS of QBs, AFS shall include the balance sheet, income statement, statement of changes in equity, statement of cash flows, notes to financial statements, and the opinion of external auditor. For financial audit, the AFS shall be submitted by the QB to appropriate supervising department of the Bangko Sentral, not later than 120 calendar days after the close of the calendar year or fiscal year adopted by the QB, accompanied by the documentary requirements as enumerated under Q number 33. The Monetary, in its resolution number 48, dated January 8, 2020, approved the amendments to the relevant provisions of the Manual of Regulations for non-bank financial institutions. Now let's proceed to number 1081. This talks about the amendments to the regulations governing the personal equity and retirement account. So, the valuation of securities and basis of computation of the basic security deposited requirement. Government securities deposited with Bangko Sentral shall be measured at fair value according to the marking-to-market guidelines for government securities under Appendix 28 or Q20. Now, number 1082 talks about the reduction in reserve requirements. The governor, upon the authority of the Monetary Board, in its resolution number 423, dated 23 March 2020, approved a reduction in the reserve requirement ratios of deposit and deposit substitute liabilities of universal and commercial banks and non-bank financial institutions with quasi-banking functions. The following rules and regulations shall govern the reserves against deposit and deposit substitute liabilities. This circular shall take effect on April 3, 2020, after its publication either in the official gazette or in a newspaper of general circulation. Circular number 1091 talks about the exclusion of debt securities held by market makers from single borrower's limit. For exclusion from loan limit, if debt securities acquired as a result of market-making activities pursuant to the rules and guidelines of the Securities and Exchange Commission and the market or exchange where such securities are traded or enrolled. The market-making position shall be taken up in the trading book in accordance with Section 614 on investment activities of Bangko Sentral supervised financial institution. The market-making position shall be properly identified and segregated from the BSFI's proprietary positions, and BSFI shall periodically monitor the market value of the subject debt securities and the number of days the securities have been outstanding from date of acquisition. For number 1092, Section 251 of the Manual of Regulations for the Banks on Required Reserves against Deposit and Deposit Substitute Liabilities, as amended by Circular number 1082 dated March 31, 2020, is hereby amended to read as follows. The following rules and regulations shall govern the reserve against deposit and deposit substitute liabilities. This circular shall take effect on July 31, 2020, after its publication either in the official gazette or in a newspaper of general circulation. On number 1095, Bangko Sentral issued securities as an additional instrument of monetary. In its resolution number 1108 dated September 3, 2020, the Monetary Board approved the following MORB or MORNBFI to operationalize the additional instrument for the Bangko Sentral monetary operations, particularly the inclusion of the Bangko Sentral issued securities, such as bills and bonds. The issuance of Bangko Sentral securities is an additional monetary instrument for liquidity management. Issued Bangko Sentral securities shall be offered to banks subject to the rules and guidelines issued by the Bangko Sentral. So this is the Bangko Sentral issued bills and bonds. As you can see on Section 3, Annexes A1, A2, and A3 of the circular shall place the corresponding appendices of the MORB or MORNBFI as follows. Annexes A1 and A2 of the circular shall replace Appendix Q82 of the MORB, Q48 of the MOR. So here's the Bangko Sentral issued bills and bonds. For Circular Number 1099, Cash Service Alliance General Guidelines, the Monetary Board, in its Resolution Number 1153 dated September 10, 2020, approved the amendments to the Manual of Regulation for Banks for adoption of the Cash Service Alliance General Guidelines. Section 113 of the MORB is hereby added to read as follows. Cash Service Alliance is currency circulation mechanism that aims to enable all authorized agent banks to enter into a mutually beneficial agreement to service requirements for Philippines currency of other banks from their available currency holdings. Let me show you these requirements. So this is the requirement of number 1099. Let's go to audit of considerations. The auditor considers many factors in determining the nature, timing, and extent of auditing procedures to be performed in an audit of an entity's financial statements. One of the factors is the existence of an internal audit functions. Now, why is the audit of banks considered different or difficult than usual? First is acceptance. Acceptance is a problem already, so you need to make sure that you have the right of experience. Resources. Resources is the number of people that you have, the auditing tools that you have the ability to get experts and specialists because of the succeeding concerns or succeeding considerations in auditing bank complex. Next is highly regulated. Various reporting requirements for the external auditors after you completed your audit issued. You have to issue also the certificates and reports to the BSP on a particular period, or otherwise it would be a finding, and it is also an accreditation requirement. The performance every audit is recorded and assessed by the BSP whenever you apply for accreditation before accepting in the course of audit. Third is the peculiar transaction. Complex, particularly starting from clip banks to expanded commercial banks. Rural banks, typically the FIS, just pertaining to loans. All of them will be considered complex when you apply PFRS 9 ECL model. Regardless of the bank, there are certain differences. It's more actually difficult to apply that for rural bank because their resources is less than the expanded commercial banks. They can get experts to do this on their own, a timely basis, while the rural bank are difficult because it is costly and also involve more work just to come up with the ACL model to their portfolio. Assets could rapidly charge in value, especially during this period. That's why, at the onset of the audit of financial institutions, the auditor thinking should be considering the environment, economy, and industry so that they could particularly useful suspect the loans receivable. Fourth is the extensive use of PFRS 9. Because of the pandemic, there might be an emphasis on the debt modification due to the borrowing to the Bayanihan Act. There was a deferral of at least 2 months. If the bank did not accrue during that period, there might be gain or loss on debt modification. But still that happened because of the Bayanihan Act. If the bank did not accrue, the interest will gain or loss. If the loss is higher, the bottom line will be effective. It is a forward-looking information that need to consider the ELC computation, so you have to consider as well the COVID-19 overlay, in which case the banks is usually classify borrowers as the type of loans. During this pandemic, there became necessary to classify them by industry because the type of look will be the same of real estate. For insurance, restaurants, and hotel, this is example who are affected during pandemic. Fraud consideration. ask the auditor and management as a member of accounting team so that we could properly take into consideration when accounting for transaction and for auditor assessing the risk. As auditor, the responsibility in respect of fraud is determination of misstatement. Not necessarily fraud, but these statements should be identified and properly addressed. Sixth is the remote auditing and COVID-19 limitations. All accountants, management, company, and auditor's side is difficult because you have to do the auditing online. You have to make sure of the authenticity of the documents, and the management is to make sure that they have all documents scanned or prepared electronically or in virtual show the documents to the external auditors. That's all. Thank you.